The Whispers of Swanscombe. In my youth, I thought nothing more charming than the quaint seaside village of Swanscombe, perched on the jagged cliffs of the English coast. Returning as an adult, many years after my grandparents' passing, I found it changed, unsettlingly so. I'd inherited their antique cottage and all of the memories trapped within its dust-laden corners. The first several nights were disquieting. I awoke to an eerie chorus of waves, the rhythmic crash more foreboding than I recalled. They echoed against the stone facades of the houses and slipped through the cracks of their weathered shutters. Each morning, I convinced myself it was the change of scenery, the old house creaking under the weight of time, or perhaps the isolation. But then, the whispers started. Always after sunset, when the last light of day retreated, swallowed by the encroaching night. They were faint, too indistinct to discern any coherent message, but persistent, like a quiet breeze seeping through the window. I searched for their source, but found no sign of a person or animal that could be the culprit. One night, the whispers became more assertive, their tones taking on an urgency that quickened my pulse. I could almost make out words, an anxious string of syllables that stirred a chilling dread within me. I decided to turn to the villagers, hoping someone might shed light on the peculiarity that had gripped my home. They listened politely, their eyes sharing a look I couldn't decipher. Was it fear? Pity? Old Marjorie, the village's self-proclaimed historian, finally broke the silence. You've met them then. The whisperers, they are. Her words sent a chill down my spine. She proceeded to recount an old legend passed down through generations. Swanscombe wasn't just a peaceful coastal town, it was a tomb to a group of villagers who, centuries ago, were lured into the sea by an otherworldly entity. The entity would whisper sweet promises into their minds, driving them to walk into the watery abyss, their voices forever trapped in the wind. I dismissed it as superstitious nonsense. Yet, the whispers continued, growing louder, more insistent, and now, they began to form coherent sentences. They spoke of secrets, of desires, of an end to loneliness. They knew my fears, my hopes, and they seemed to promise solace. The allure was powerful, almost hypnotic, and the morbid part of me started to entertain the whispers, to question whether there might be some truth to the legend. Was I not, after all, in desperate need of companionship? Wasn't I at the edge of the world, in a village forgotten by time? It was a moonless night when the whispers became screams, the incoherent chatter transforming into piercing shrieks of terror that echoed in my mind. They begged for mercy, for release, the desperation raw and searing. I covered my ears, but the screams were inside me, inescapable, and the terror they inspired was palpable. I was drawn towards the sea, its dark expanse simultaneously threatening and inviting. The cold surf lapped at my feet, the salty spray stung my eyes, yet I couldn't tear myself away. The cries were louder here, so loud I could scarcely think. A whisper slipped into my mind, different from the rest, a melodious murmur promising an end to the torment, to the deafening screams. All I had to do was walk, to let the sea claim me as it had the others. As I stood on the precipice of the eternal deep, I realized the horror of it. The entity wasn't a figment of folklore, but a harrowing reality. It lived in the wind, the waves, feeding on isolation, despair, the minds of the lonely. I was on the brink of becoming another voice, another whisperer forever confined to the gales of Swanscombe. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. I ran, fleeing the haunting sea and the chilling screams that seemed to pursue me. Back in the cottage, I shut the windows, the doors, trying to drown out the voices. But they were already inside me, their whispers turning into a silent roar in my mind. I left Swanscombe the next morning, leaving behind the cottage and the haunted shores. I moved to the city, surrounded myself with noise, people, life. Yet, every night, as the city quiets, I hear them, the whispers. Fainter now, but still there, an eternal reminder of the torment waiting in that quaint seaside village. I live in fear now, fear that the whispers will grow louder again, that the entity will find me. For in its haunting lullaby, it promised one thing, it would always be there, waiting, whispering, in the echoes of the sea. Leaving Swanscombe didn't put an end to the whispers as I had hoped. Instead, it just managed to keep them at bay. During the day, when the city was alive with its cacophonous blend of honking cars, shouting vendors, and bustling crowds, I could forget. But at night, when silence cloaked the city, they returned, those quiet, insidious whispers that snuck into my thoughts, stirring up fear and anxiety. I tried to combat it. Therapists, medications, white noise machines, anything that might help me ignore the persistent voices in my head. I even started dating, hoping the company of another might alleviate the crushing loneliness that seemed to invite the whispers. But nothing helped. Each relationship ended quickly, the strain of my midnight terrors too much to bear. Months turned into years, and my life became a routine of managing my sanity. Yet, an undeniable truth was slowly creeping up on me. I had to return to Swanscombe. It was clear that I wouldn't find peace until I confronted the entity, faced the voices that had tormented me for so long. Perhaps, if I could understand what they wanted, why they'd chosen me, I might be able to silence them for good. With heavy reluctance, I made the journey back. Swanscombe seemed unchanged, still the picturesque, quiet village as if preserved in a timeless bubble. My old home, however, stood in stark contrast, with its peeling paint, overgrown gardens, and an eerie silence that replaced the once comforting familiarity. The whispers returned, more forceful than ever, as soon as I crossed the threshold. They filled my head, a cacophony of dread, fear, and desperate pleas for help. I tried speaking to them, pleading, demanding answers. But their screams were the only response. Driven to desperation, I turned to old Marjorie again. She had lived here her whole life, was well versed in the local law. If anyone knew how to appease the entity, it was her. When I told her my intention, her eyes widened, and she pressed a worn, ancient-looking book into my hands. "The rights of the sea," she murmured, her voice trembling, "there's a ritual in there. The old folks used it, to communicate with the sea, with the entity. It's dangerous, mind ye. You'll be opening a door that mayn't be shut again." I studied the book, the faded pages filled with arcane symbols and instructions. There was a particular passage, the ritual Marjorie mentioned, which called for offerings and a chant to be performed at midnight on the shore. It was risky, possibly foolish, but I felt strangely drawn to it. What did I have to lose? I reasoned. My life was already in shambles. This could be my one chance to find answers, to put an end to my torment. So, under the watchful gaze of a full moon, I stood once more on the cliffs of Swanscombe, the frigid sea breeze whipping at my hair. I had laid out the offerings, objects of personal significance, tokens of my past life, a symbol of my willingness to let go. And then, I began to chant, the old words rolling off my tongue as if I'd known them all my life. The world around me changed. The sea grew still, the wind died down, and then the whispers silenced. For the first time in years, there was quiet. My heart pounded in the stillness, but I continued to chant, drawn into the arcane rhythms. A darkness, deeper than the night, began to rise from the sea. It twisted and coiled, forming a presence, an entity that seemed to scrutinize me. The whispers returned, but they were different, clear, singular, a voice that belonged to the entity itself. And then, it spoke to me. It spoke of loneliness, of its existence bound to the sea, the wind. It spoke of the voices, the villagers it had lured into the depths, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for companionship. And now, it had me, another voice to add to its chorus. It was a horrifying truth, a destiny I couldn't accept. I wasn't ready to become another lost soul, another whisper on the wind. Yet, how could I combat an ancient, omnipotent entity? As if in response to my unspoken question, the entity faltered, the darkness receding a fraction. It wasn't as invincible as it appeared. It was bound by the same curse that had claimed the villagers, that was threatening to claim me. With newfound resolve, I returned to the ritual, altering the chant. I summoned not just the entity, but the spirits it had trapped, offered not just my possessions, but my empathy, my understanding. I promised to remember them, to tell their story, to alleviate their loneliness in life, not death. The entity recoiled as the spirits stirred, their whispers growing louder, stronger. The darkness began to dissipate, revealing ethereal figures trapped within its folds. They reached out to me, their gratitude clear in their whispers. They didn't want to be forgotten, to be lost. My promise had given them hope. As dawn broke, the last of the darkness receded into the sea. The whispers were gone, replaced by a peaceful silence that brought tears to my eyes. I was free. I still live in Swanscombe. The villagers no longer fear the whispering wind, and the spirits of the lost have found some semblance of peace. Their stories have become a part of our history, their memory a comforting presence. We've learned to live with our ghosts, our whispers, and in doing so, we've freed ourselves from fear.